I'm Concept Soup. This is a bottle of Robinson's Squeezy Squash. And this is the IONZ GE336F case. Now, I saw your mother out on the promenade last night, and I thought that was cheap. But the IONZ GE336F is a £40 case, and ye gods, that is cheap. We're going to take a case tour, show you what's up with it, put together a build, and reconvene with our thoughts. Let's go! £40 with mesh and RGB fans is a pretty tasty proposition. So let's see what we get for our money here. Let's start with the back panel, the cable management side, because it forms a large part of the build process and it gets no love. 2 thumb screws on the back enable us to take off the back panel. Here we can see all the front panel cables as well as the cables from the 3 included RGB fans on the front of the case. These use proprietary connectors, which is a bit of a shame. Proprietary meaning they're not a standard connector that you can use with multiple different products. They are also Molex powered, which also is a bit of a shame. The proprietary RGB connectors do, however, terminate in a standard 3-pin ARGB connector, which is good because it means we can control the RGB using the motherboard, as long as your motherboard actually has that facility. Otherwise, you can cycle the colors using the button on the front of the case. The power supply shroud will allow standard ATX power supplies. If you plan to use a very large power supply, such as an HX1000i or something, you'll probably need to remove the drive cage to accommodate this, but for most standard power supplies, you'll have no problem. Speaking of the drive cage, it holds a 3.5-inch hard drive and a 2.5-inch drive. However, these are the only spots to mount these SATA drives on the whole case. For 99% of the users, that is plenty, but worth considering if you're a power user or a bit of a storage fiend. You can remove the drive cage by unscrewing this thumb screw on the bottom and then sliding the whole thing out. There is a little flexibility to move the drive cage forward or back. I recommend having it as close to the front of the case as possible so you have the most room for cable management. Now, cable management is bog standard on this case, which is fine, really. You have a few basic tie-down points, nothing fancy, but this is enough for the vast majority of people, including me. I like that there are 2 cable routing holes slightly higher than normal here, because it makes routing cables to micro ATX motherboards a lot better. It shows that IONZ really know their target market, i.e. the budget sector, because most budget motherboards are MATX size. But enough here. Let's look at the rest. The rear of the case has room for a 120mm fan, and the PCIe slot covers are the snap-off type rather than the screwed-in type, but that's absolutely fine considering that this is a budget case. The front of the case is a metallic mesh with a plastic divide down the middle. I think it looks pretty good for the case of this price. There are 3 120mm ARGB fans included, however they are Molex powered, which means that they will always run at 100% speed, and that's a bit of a disappointment. The front panel connectors are power button, LED button, USB 3, and then you've got 2 USB 2s, and then you've got separate mic and headphone jacks. Onto the presentation side now, we can see there is plenty of room for ATX, MATX, and ITX motherboards. There are cable management holes above the motherboard for easy access. There are cutouts for your motherboard cables along the bottom here, as well as an additional cutout for graphics card PCIe power cables towards the front. I really like when case manufacturers do this because it makes the cable management look so much better. So IONZ, good job. Liquid cooler support will be limited to the front of the case. There is simply not enough room on the top without it impacting on your RAM. You could put fans up there, but not a radiator. I think you could fit a 360mm liquid cooler on the front of the case if you move that drive cage back a bit, but most people would stick with a 240mm if you're going to use a liquid cooler at all. In terms of dimensions, we're sitting at 445 by 205 by 396mm. First impressions are strong for this case. £40 is very cheap, especially considering the cost to ship this from presumably China. I think you're getting great value for money. The only real letdown is that the fans are Molex powered, so you can't control the speed like we've talked about before. I don't like open power supply cutouts like this, but I suppose that's a personal preference. Otherwise, it is well featured and thoughtfully designed, and it looks decent. So that's the introduction. Let's build and test. So here we are, finished. I think it looks great for the money. A nice RGB mesh gaming case, all in, and I'd be happy with this build were I on a budget. Less money on the case means more money on the performance parts like the graphics card, which are going to make a tangible difference to your gaming experience. But we still get decent airflow and features, so we're not going to be held back by the case in that sense. Our CPU temperature was a little on the high side, 90 degrees maximum in our Prime 95 test, but remember, in actual gaming, those temperatures will be much lower, and we are using the free stock cooler. A cheap tower air cooler will cut those temperatures right down, something like a VetTrue V5 for example. The graphics card was very cool at 64 degrees, but that's to be expected of the Radeon RX 6600, it's very power efficient. For a budget build, we're getting surprisingly good performance at 1440p resolution, but if you're a bit more competitive, 1080p high refresh rate gaming is an absolute breeze on this system, you'll love it. So, final thoughts. Is this worth buying? At £40, currently it is among the best in class. I can't see where else you're getting this kind of value. If the MSI Mag Forge, which we have reviewed before, came back down to around £45, that would definitely be a better option. Build quality's better, everything about it is essentially better. But I don't see that happening again for a while. The only real letdown again is those Molex fans. I would happily pay the extra £5 if they were to change these to PWM or at least DC controllable fans to reduce the noise. And that is really the trade-off here. The system will not be silent. Not deafening by any means, but not quiet either because you can't control the fan speed. So, what did you think? Like it? Hate it? Tell me what to review next time in the comments. And don't forget that this is Robinson's Squeezy Squash. Peace.